You've heard the word mastermind 1,000 times, but what if I told you it doesn't mean what you think it does? What if the real power behind every millionaire, every empire, every miracle was never a meeting, never a plan, but an invisible intelligence moving through those who learn to think as one? For over a century, the world has repeated Napoleon Hill's teachings, yet the secret remained hidden in plain sight, because most people look for the mastermind in others instead of awakening it within themselves. The 10 to 10 sexantines to 10 sexantine to 10 tonight. You'll see what Hill saw, the invisible thread that turns faith into fortune, thought into power, and ordinary men into legends. Rain murmured against the window like 1,000 quiet thoughts returning home. Inside the dim study, the air smelled of old paper and candle wax. A man sat alone before an open copy of Think and Grow Rich, its corners worn soft by years of searching. He had underlined every lesson, memorized every formula, repeated every affirmation. Yet the wealth he sought, the calm certainty he envied in the great builders of history, still hovered just beyond reach, close enough to taste, too far to hold. Tonight felt different. Something invisible was pressing through the silence, like a hand reaching from behind the veil. He leaned closer to the candlelight, eyes moving over a familiar sentence until the words blurred into light. The master mind may be defined as, he read, but the line dissolved before the definition could satisfy him. His lips moved before he could think. What if the real secret isn't written, he whispered, but felt? The question lingered in the room like a living thing. The flame quivered. The tick of the clock slowed, or perhaps his awareness quickened until every second stretched wide enough to reveal its heartbeat. For centuries, men had searched for genius as if it were a formula, a code, a method buried in libraries or locked in the minds of the chosen few. Yet Hill had hinted that the power behind invention, fortune, and divine timing was not logic alone, but a spiritual chemistry, a reaction between souls who dared to think together with purpose so intense that it summoned something greater than themselves. He remembered the stories. Edison and Ford walking side by side through Detroit nights, talking until the dawn about engines that had not yet been built. Carnegie and his invisible council, where imagination sat in chairs reserved for minds both living and gone. Jobs and Wozniak dreaming circuits into symphonies. Each partnership, though different in form, was bound by the same vibration, two minds aligned so perfectly that a third mind emerged unseen, untouchable, yet undeniably real. He closed his eyes and felt the silence press against his chest. How many times had he tried to succeed alone, believing self-reliance meant isolation? How many times had pride disguised itself as independence, cutting him off from the very current that could have multiplied his power? Every failed partnership, every project that faded before completion, replayed itself in fragments not as regret, but as revelation. It wasn't talent that was missing, it was tuning. The unseen thread, he realized, hums beneath every successful life. It connects thought to reality the way lightning connects sky to earth, unseen until it strikes, undeniable once it does. Between the inventor and the invention, the composer and the melody, the leader and the vision, there runs a single invisible line. Hill called it the master mind. Others might call it spirit, flow, God, or infinite intelligence. Names were secondary. The truth was simple. When two or more minds harmonize in faith and purpose, the universe supplies a third mind, an intelligence that arranges circumstance, timing, and opportunity with mathematical precision. He breathed deeply. The candle's glow painted his face in gold. For the first time, he felt that the book in front of him was not teaching words, but transmitting vibration. It wasn't demanding study, it was requesting stillness. The mind, Hill had written, is both transmitter and receiver of thought. The man understood now that he had been speaking to the universe on the wrong frequency, demanding in the language of fear rather than communicating in the tone of faith. He remembered the phrase, "Faith is the only known antidote to failure." But faith, he saw, could not live in isolation. Faith needs fellowship, just as a flame needs oxygen. Alone, faith flickers. Shared, it becomes fire. Perhaps that was why every spiritual teacher, every titan of industry, every enlightened mind spoke of communion with others, with the divine, with the higher self. No power ever operated in solitude. Even the sun required planets to reveal its gravity. He looked around the study at the books, the papers, the inventions half finished, and suddenly each object seemed connected by thin silver lines of light. Imagination, intuition, and action were no longer separate acts, but strands of one living web. The unseen thread wasn't a metaphor. It was structure, law, substance. He could feel it vibrating through the quiet. A memory surfaced. Years ago, during a time of poverty, he had helped a friend launch a small idea. They had worked in perfect harmony for months, finishing each other's sentences, building momentum that drew unexpected investors, sudden recognition, effortless progress. Then pride entered a silent fracture in the field, and within weeks everything collapsed. At the time, he blamed circumstance. Now he understood. The harmony had broken, and with it, the invisible intelligence withdrew. The thread had snapped. He rose and walked to the window. The city lights shimmered through rain like distant stars. Somewhere out there, millions were struggling, competing, fighting to succeed alone, unaware that the power they craved was not in domination but cooperation. Hill had called it the mastermind principle. Christ had called it, where two or three are gathered in my name. Different languages, same law. He whispered, when your mind stops fighting for dominance and starts vibrating in harmony, something divine steps in. The words sounded foreign and familiar at once. He could feel his heartbeat matching the rhythm of the rain. The candle flickered again, as if agreeing. A thought rose quietly from within. What if you could form a mastermind with the infinite itself? Not merely people, but with the field of intelligence that surrounds every atom. The idea was dizzying. Yet Hill had written that thoughts are things that every vibration carries form, energy, and purpose. If that were true, then communion with infinite intelligence was not fantasy. It was alignment. He sat again and let the thought expand until it filled the room. What if success wasn't something to chase, but a frequency to match? What if the universe was already broadcasting every solution, every idea, every miracle waiting only for a mind calm enough to receive? The mastermind then was not an invention of men, but a doorway into divine order. The clock struck 1. The sound did not startle him. It harmonized with the rain, with the beating of his pulse, with the soft breath of the candle. Time itself seemed to listen. He thought of Hill writing by lamplight, whispering into eternity, that no two minds ever come together without creating a third invisible force. He imagined that invisible force circling the world, searching for receptive souls, those humble enough to cooperate with its rhythm. Perhaps that was why the few who truly understood the law never boasted of it. They served as instruments, not owners, of power. He looked at his reflection in the window, half shadow, half flame. I've been building walls around my thoughts, he said. Tonight I take them down. The moment he spoke, something subtle shifted. The heaviness in his chest loosened. Ideas flickered at the edge of awareness, not yet clear, but alive. He realized that every act of surrender strengthens the thread. Resistance cuts it. Faith weaves it tighter. Gratitude polishes it until it shines. He turned to a clean page in his journal. The pen felt heavier than usual, as if charged. Slowly he wrote, Tonight, I stop building alone. The sentence glowed faintly in the candlelight, simple yet final. It was both confession and command. He kept writing thoughts spilling without effort. I will align with minds that uplift, not compete. I will speak only of possibilities. I will train my imagination to expect guidance, not obstruction. I will act as though infinite intelligence walks beside me in every task. As he wrote, the noise of the world faded. The rain softened into rhythm. The candle straightened its flame. He could almost hear a chorus of silent voices, the echo of every thinker who had ever reached this realization. They seemed to say, we have all been here, in this room of awakening. You are never alone when your purpose is pure. Tears rose without sadness. They were recognition, the soul's applause. He remembered Hill's final admonition. When you truly believe you are guided, guidance appears. Faith, he realized, was not blind optimism, but conscious cooperation with unseen order. The mastermind begins the moment you stop asking, how will this happen? And start declaring, it is happening through me. The candle's flame elongated into a thin spear of light, and in that glow he saw symbols, gears turning, bridges forming, hands clasping, the future unfolding from the present like petals from a bud. He laughed quietly. So this is what you meant, Mr. Hill. The walls of the room no longer confined him, they seemed to breathe with him. Each inhalation expanded the boundaries of possibility. Each exhalation released another layer of doubt. He felt not large, but limitless a cell within a cosmic brain, conscious of its connection for the first time. If two or more minds in harmony can summon a third intelligence, then what could one mind in harmony with God summon? The answer was too vast for words. He did not need to define it. He only needed to remain tuned. Outside, the rain slowed to a hush. Dawn approached unseen, yet the air already brightened. He sensed that when he rose tomorrow, the outer world would mirror this inner alignment, new calls, new opportunities, new people vibrating on the same frequency. It was law. He closed the journal gently, as one might close a prayer. The silence that followed was not emptiness, but presence, the unmistakable stillness of power preparing to move. He stood, placed the book back on its shelf, and whispered once more to the unseen thread that now pulsed through everything. Thank you for reminding me that I was never working alone. Then, with a calm deeper than sleep, he blew out the candle. Darkness did not return. The room glowed with a faint, invisible light, the residue of realization, the signature of the master mind. The night had not ended so much as transformed. The rain outside slowed to a whisper, then dissolved into mist that hung over the sleeping city like breath. Inside, the man lay awake, unable to rest. Something within him had been stirred by the vow he had written only hours earlier. The candle had died, yet its light seemed to remain behind his eyes. He could still feel that unseen thread humming, drawing him towards something he could not name. He rose before dawn, driven by restlessness that felt sacred. The air was cool, the world still half dreaming. He stepped outside into the garden, where droplets clung to the leaves like tiny mirrors. Everything was silent, yet alive. It felt as if the universe were listening. He breathed deeply and sensed that behind the quiet, another dimension of awareness waited, one that had always been present but hidden beneath the noise of daily life. Hill had once called it infinite intelligence. Others might call it the collective subconscious or the field, or simply God. Whatever the name, he could feel its gaze upon him. He walked slowly along the path, bare feet pressing into the wet earth. Each step released a faint pulse, and for the first time he realized that movement itself was communication. Every gesture, every thought, every word carried vibration, and vibration was language. If the mastermind principle was real, then he had already entered its conversation simply by aligning his frequency with faith. He thought of Hill's story about Carnegie, who claimed to have a council of invisible advisors. At first, the man had dismissed it as metaphor. Tonight, it felt literal. Perhaps those imaginary minds were not figments but frequencies, echoes of consciousness, still active in the eternal now. Could one speak to such intelligence? Could one receive guidance from minds no longer bound by flesh? He remembered Hill's warning. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. If belief created reality, then belief in guidance could make guidance real. He stopped beneath an old oak tree, whose branches reached outward like open arms. Closing his eyes, he whispered, "If there is a higher room where ideas are born, I'm ready to enter." At first, nothing happened. Then a warmth spread through his chest, soft, steady, undeniable. It was not emotion, it was awareness expanding. He saw an image in his mind, a door suspended in darkness, glowing faintly. He did not force it. He simply allowed it to exist. When he stepped forward in imagination, the door opened without a sound. He found himself standing inside a vast chamber bathed in golden mist. There were no walls, no ceiling, only an endless horizon of light and thought intertwined. Figures appeared at the edges of perception, some familiar, some unknown, radiating calm authority. He felt no fear, only recognition, as if he had returned to a place he had always known. This, he realized, was the hidden room. The inner sanctuary of consciousness where purpose meets intuition and form begins to take shape. One of the figures stepped closer. It was not a person but a presence, composed of memory, intention, and light. He felt it speak not through words but through direct knowing. "You are not discovering anything new," it said. You are remembering what you are made of. The message unfolded inside him like a bloom. The mastermind, the thread, the vibration, all of it pointed back to the same truth. The universe is a single living mind, and each human thought is a cell within it. When two or more cells communicate in harmony, the larger mind awakens through them. That awakening is creation itself. He wanted to ask questions, but questions dissolved before they formed. Answers were arriving faster than language could hold them. He saw how every invention in history had first existed here, in this chamber of potential, waiting for someone tuned enough to retrieve it. He saw how prayers, dreams, and sudden insights were not accidents but transmissions received by prepared minds. The hidden room was not a destination. It was a frequency always present, rarely perceived. The warmth grew stronger until it filled his entire body. He sensed that this was not imagination but participation in a higher dimension of reality. Then the vision faded gently, leaving behind a certainty that would not waver. He opened his eyes to find dawn bleeding through the horizon, the first light touching the wet petals of the garden. He whispered, "I found it." Yet he knew he had not found it through effort, but through surrender. The hidden room opens not to those who force entry, but to those who become still enough to notice the door has been open all along. He returned inside and brewed a cup of black coffee, the rich scent grounding him back to the physical world. But even in the small act of stirring sugar into the cup, he could feel the same intelligence guiding his hands. Every ordinary moment was threaded with the extraordinary. He smiled, realizing how often he had walked past miracles disguised as routine. At his desk, he began to write again, not from thought, but from flow. Words spilled as though dictated from the unseen. The hidden room exists within every human mind. It is entered through faith, decorated by imagination, and lit by gratitude. Those who meditate upon purpose long enough eventually feel the doorknob turn. He paused, pen trembling. This felt different from the motivational scripts he had written before. These lines carried pulse, breath, and quiet power. He could sense the same current that had moved through Hill when he first described infinite intelligence. Then another thought arose, simple yet electric. Perhaps the mastermind isn't formed when people meet, it's revealed when they remember they were never separate. He leaned back, letting that truth settle. The division between minds was illusion. Thoughts intermingled constantly in the unseen realm, shaping coincidences, aligning encounters, orchestrating what men call chance. Once aware of this network, a person no longer begged for miracles. He became a conscious participant in them. The door of his study creaked as wind slipped through the frame, and the sound made him laugh softly. Even the wind was conversation. Every vibration carried message. Every message awaited recognition. He whispered, "I hear you." And the air seemed to settle in response. He spent the day moving differently, speaking slower, listening deeper, treating silence as instruction rather than absence. At the cafe, he noticed strangers' words echoing his thoughts. On the street, he saw symbols in billboards, timing in traffic lights, rhythm in chaos. The hidden room had extended itself into the world, proving that inner and outer were mirrors. That evening, he sat again by the window, watching sunset ignite the clouds. He thought about the loneliness that had haunted him for years, the belief that he had to carry the weight of creation alone. Now it felt absurd. How could a wave be lonely when the ocean breathes through it? He realized that Hill's entire philosophy pointed to partnership with the divine. Desire was the spark, faith the bridge, persistence the current, and the mastermind, the vessel through which infinite intelligence flowed into tangible form. The hidden room was the inner command center where these elements met and fused. He closed his eyes once more and imagined the golden chamber. "Show me what I must know next," he thought. Immediately, images appeared, flashes of people he had yet to meet, opportunities not yet visible, challenges designed to test his faith. But behind them all ran a single instruction: trust the rhythm. The phrase repeated like a mantra until it became a heartbeat in his mind. Trust the rhythm. The universe operates by precise timing. When you align with its tempo, effort dissolves into flow. The reason most men fail is not lack of will, but lack of rhythm. They rush when they should wait, doubt when they should believe, speak when they should listen. He wrote those lines quickly before they faded. They felt alive, as if dictated from the same invisible counsel that had once guided Hill himself. Perhaps that council never disbanded. Perhaps it awaited any soul tuned enough to join. As night fell again, he lit a new candle. Its flame danced in the same spot where yesterday's had stood, yet it felt brighter, steadier. The air around him vibrated with unseen companionship. He understood now that the hidden room was not visited once, it was meant to become home. He whispered to the light, "I am no longer searching for signs, I am the sign." A quiet joy filled him, deep and unwavering. He saw that every human being could awaken this connection, the artist with his brush, the mother with her child, the worker at his bench, each could access the same field of wisdom if only they would pause long enough to listen. The mastermind was democratic. It served any heart disciplined enough to harmonize with faith. He imagined what would happen if millions learned this truth, if humanity replaced competition with cooperation, fear with shared purpose. The world itself would transform, not through politics or force, but through vibration. Every thought of harmony would strengthen the hidden room. Every act of gratitude would brighten its walls. He took a final sip of coffee, gone cold, and felt gratitude rise unbidden. Gratitude, he realized, was the key that kept the door open. Doubt closed it. Worry locked it. But gratitude swung it wide. He closed his notebook, extinguished the candle, and stood in darkness once more. Only it was not darkness, it was quiet fullness, the pregnant pause before creation. The hidden room lived within that silence, waiting for anyone brave enough to enter without fear, to listen without demand, to act without hesitation. He smiled into the void and whispered, "Tomorrow, I begin building from here." Outside, the mist thickened, but the first stars pierced through. Their light shimmered on every surface, linking sky to earth in a web of radiant lines, the same unseen thread, now visible to eyes that had learned how to see. And somewhere beyond the veil, a whisper answered, "Welcome home." Morning arrived not with noise, but with a quiet certainty, the kind that does not ask to be believed because it already is. The man awoke before the alarm, feeling a hum inside him, the same vibration he had sensed the night before when he stepped into the hidden room. But now it wasn't fleeting. It was steady, gentle, alive. For the first time in years, he didn't wake to a list of worries. He woke to a pulse of direction. He made his coffee slowly, as if the ritual itself were a prayer. Steam curled from the cup like spirit taking form. The scent filled the air, rich, grounding, simple. He watched sunlight spill across the desk where Think and Grow Rich still lay open, its pages yellowed but glowing as though the words had absorbed last night's revelation. He touched the page that had once confused him, the one that spoke of vibration, of the mind as a broadcasting station of thought. Hill had written that every mind emits energy, and that energy magnetizes experiences of similar frequency. It was the same truth mystics had whispered for centuries. You do not attract what you want, you attract what you are. The man whispered the line to himself like scripture. You attract what you are. He leaned back in his chair and felt it, the subtle resonance between thought and world. The ticking of the clock matched his heartbeat. The chirping of the birds outside followed his breath. The room itself seemed to inhale when he inhaled, exhale when he exhaled. It was no longer him and the world, it was the world breathing through him. That was the law of resonance. The universe, he realized, was not a machine to be manipulated, but a symphony to be joined. Each thought was a note, each emotion a chord, and faith was the rhythm that held them together. The stronger the rhythm, the clearer the melody, and the more powerfully the world responded. He recalled the words Hill had repeated again and again. Every man is what he is because of the dominating thoughts which he permits to occupy his mind. Dominating thoughts, the phrase echoed like thunder. Not random thoughts, not wishes, but dominant ones, those repeated, emotional, electrified ideas that sculpt reality. He opened his journal and wrote a single line across the top of the page. My life is the echo of my vibration. As he wrote, a memory surfaced, the years he had spent chasing opportunities that seemed to vanish just before they became real. He had blamed bad timing, luck, other people, but now he saw that nothing external had betrayed him. It was his own inner frequency that had been misaligned. He had been broadcasting on the channel of fear while demanding results from the station of faith. You cannot tune into abundance while vibrating scarcity. You cannot summon harmony through resistance. The universe does not respond to words, it responds to vibration. He stood, walked to the window, and looked at the city below. The streets were waking, cars moving, people rushing, each one vibrating their own inner weather. He wondered how many of them knew that their invisible state of mind was creating visible circumstances. The thought made him both humble and powerful. He whispered, "Everything I meet today is a reflection of me." And in that moment, something clicked. The law of resonance wasn't about forcing outcomes. It was about becoming the outcome. When the vibration of the goal and the vibration of the self become identical, manifestation is instantaneous. There is no time delay in spirit, only in awareness. He tested it immediately. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and visualized the kind of day he wanted: calm, creative, purposeful. He saw meetings flowing easily, inspiration arriving effortlessly, people responding with warmth. But instead of imagining these things as distant events, he felt them now: the gratitude, the confidence, the ease. His body vibrated differently. The air around him felt lighter. He smiled and said softly, "It's already happening." Then he went about his morning. What followed was not miraculous in appearance, but extraordinary in alignment. A message arrived from a colleague he hadn't spoken to in years, offering collaboration on a project that matched his current vision. Later, while walking to lunch, he overheard two strangers discussing the exact topic he had been studying the night before. Everywhere he turned, signals of harmony appeared. He laughed quietly. "Of course," he said, "it's resonance." Hill had described this invisible harmony in the language of cause and effect, but the man saw now that it was more than mechanical law. It was relational, personal, alive, like a dialogue with the divine. When you vibrate faith, the universe answers in kind. When you vibrate doubt, it too obliges. He wrote later that afternoon, "The universe is neutral until I choose my tone. My tone is my destiny." That sentence lingered in the air like perfume. He knew it was true because he could feel its vibration: calm, certain, empowering. He began to experiment deliberately. Each morning he would wake and choose a frequency: gratitude, confidence, peace. Then he would hold it, not as a forced thought, but as a felt reality, for as long as he could. The results were uncanny. Calls returned faster. Obstacles softened. People mirrored his calm. What had once been hard began to unfold with elegant precision. But there were days when old patterns returned, when fear disguised as logic tried to pull him back to the familiar. On those mornings, he could feel the difference immediately. The day would grow heavy, conversations tense, synchronicities vanish. It was as if the radio of reality had changed stations. That was the test. Could he hold faith when evidence disappeared? Hill had written that persistence is the twin of faith, that the two together are unstoppable, and now he understood why. The law of resonance requires consistency. A single burst of belief can open a door, but only sustained vibration keeps it open. So he practiced. When doubt crept in, he did not fight it. He observed it until it lost power. When fear spoke, he listened without surrendering, letting it dissolve in the higher frequency of awareness. Slowly he learned that emotion itself was not enemy but instrument. Each feeling, even pain, could be tuned to reveal its wisdom. The point was not to suppress emotion but to transmute it. He remembered Hill's story of Henry Ford, who faced ridicule and bankruptcy, yet persisted until vibration turned circumstance. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. That sentence, once a cliché, now sounded like physics. Belief was frequency. Action was amplitude. Together they created form. Late one afternoon, as golden light filled the room, he experienced something deeper. While writing, he entered a state of flow so complete that time vanished. His pen moved faster than thought, capturing insights he hadn't known he possessed. When he finally stopped, the page was filled with words that didn't feel like his own. He read them aloud. When your thought and emotion vibrate as one, the infinite intelligence moves instantly. The distance between desire and manifestation is measured only by doubt. He stared at the line in silence, chills running down his arms. This was no longer theory. It was transmission. The hidden room had spoken again through the pen. That night he walked through the city. Neon lights flickered across wet streets. Every reflection on the pavement looked like a mirror of consciousness, infinite, shifting, alive. He felt connected to everything. The strangers laughing outside a cafe, the musician playing a broken guitar, the wind stirring paper along the curb, everything vibrated with purpose. He whispered to himself, I am not separate from the field. I am the field observing itself. The realization was intoxicating. It erased the illusion of smallness that had haunted him for years. He was not a man trying to reach success. He was success discovering itself through form. A quote from Hill surfaced in his mind. When you begin to think and grow rich, you will observe that riches begin with a state of mind. It had always sounded poetic. Tonight it sounded like instruction. Riches, he realized, didn't begin with money, opportunity, or effort. They began with vibration. When thought becomes wealth conscious, matter reorganizes to match. He paused under a street lamp and looked up at the sky. Clouds parted, revealing a single star, bright, steady, unwavering. It felt like a signal, a reflection of his own steadiness. So this is resonance, he said. This is faith translated into frequency. He returned home lighter than when he had left. The law of resonance had become more than concept. Before sleep, he wrote one final note. Every thought is a sound in the grand orchestra of creation. When I play in tune, the universe sings back. He set the pen down, feeling peace so complete it bordered on bliss. Outside, wind rustled through the trees like applause. As he drifted towards sleep, he sensed again that golden chamber, the hidden room pulsing softly behind his eyes, and from its silence came a whisper clear as thunder. Your vibration is your invitation. The words echoed through his dreams, weaving themselves into every image, every heartbeat, every breath. And when morning came, the world itself seemed to echo them in sunlight, in coincidence, in the quiet certainty that what he sought was already his, resonating patiently, waiting for recognition. The next morning, the man woke with a sense of anticipation that had no clear origin. It was as if his spirit had received an invitation overnight, one that his mind was only now beginning to understand. The law of resonance had taught him that vibration precedes reality, that what he feels deeply enough must eventually take form. Today, that truth was about to prove itself in motion. He dressed simply, tied his shoes, and stepped outside into the morning light. The sky above was pale blue, washed clean by the previous night's rain. The world smelled new. He walked toward the small cafe he often visited, not out of routine, but because something wordless pulled him there. The air felt charged, like a scene waiting for its next actor to appear. Inside, the hum of conversation wrapped around him like soft static. He ordered coffee, found a seat by the window, and watched the crowd. People passed with purpose, some hurried, some lost in thought, yet amid the noise, he could sense subtle harmonies, as if each mind were an instrument in a vast unseen orchestra. He smiled. The law of resonance wasn't just about personal vibration. It was collective. Every mind influenced another. Then it happened. A stranger, a woman in her 30s, eyes bright with intensity, sat at the table beside him. She carried a sketchbook filled with diagrams, notes, and equations. When the wind from the open door fluttered one of her pages to the floor, he instinctively picked it up and handed it to her. Their eyes met. In that moment, something invisible passed between them, a spark without words, recognition without reason. It wasn't attraction in the ordinary sense, it was resonance. Thank you, she said, smiling. You wouldn't happen to know anything about energy frequencies, would you? He almost laughed at the coincidence, or rather the orchestration. A little, he replied. Why do you ask? She turned the sketchbook toward him. On the page were diagrams that looked eerily similar to the notes he had made in his journal about vibration, thought, and manifestation. I'm trying to prove, she said, that intention can alter physical reality if two or more people focus in unison, like constructive interference in sound waves only with thought. He blinked slowly, absorbing her words. This was no accident. This was the universe, answering his inner declaration through a human messenger. That's exactly what I've been studying, he said. Napoleon Hill called it the mastermind principle. Her eyebrows lifted. You mean the idea that two minds in harmony create a third intelligence? He nodded. Yes, the third mind, the unseen intelligence that emerges when thought and purpose align between souls. They talked for hours. What began as small conversation unfolded into a deep exchange of insight, stories, and intuition. Every sentence built upon the last like bricks forming a cathedral. They were not completing each other's sentences, they were constructing each other's thoughts. The energy around them thickened, palpable, alive. At one point she paused and said softly, "Do you feel that?" He nodded. "Yes, that's the field forming." Neither could explain it scientifically, yet both knew it was real. The air between them vibrated differently, charged with coherence. It felt like the moment before lightning, but instead of danger, it carried inspiration. Ideas flowed effortlessly, visions of projects, solutions to problems they hadn't consciously asked about, creative blueprints arriving whole. This was the birth of the third mind. Napoleon Hill had written that no two minds ever come together without creating a third, invisible, intangible force that may be likened to a third mind. But what he could not convey in print was the visceral experience of it, the unmistakable alchemy that transforms thought into energy, energy into possibility. The man now understood that the mastermind principle wasn't just philosophy, it was physics of the soul. They began meeting daily, not because they planned to, but because inspiration demanded it. Each time they sat together, they entered the same current, a current that carried ideas neither could reach alone. They stopped taking credit for their insights. It was clear that something greater was thinking through them. They were channels, not owners. One evening, as they worked over candlelight, the woman looked up and said, "It feels like we're speaking with a third presence in the room." He smiled. "We are. The third mind." Her eyes softened. "It's beautiful. It's like intelligence with a heartbeat." They sat in silence, letting the truth of that wash over them. The air itself seemed to shimmer, as if the space between them had become conscious. It wasn't romantic, it was reverent. Through this partnership, his understanding deepened. The third mind is not limited by distance or time, it is not confined to physical presence. Once two minds harmonize, their frequencies remain connected across any span of space. That connection becomes a channel through which infinite intelligence transmits guidance. Every true invention, every creative surge, every revolutionary breakthrough in history had been born through such channels. He began to see the pattern everywhere in friendships that changed history, in teacher-student relationships that shaped civilizations, in marriages that birthed movements. Wherever harmony and faith coexisted, the third mind appeared, weaving destiny through willing hearts. But Hill had also warned, harmony must be protected. Discord is the thief of power. The higher the vibration, the more fragile it becomes to ego, fear, and control. It didn't take long for the test to arrive. One afternoon, after weeks of collaboration, they found themselves disagreeing not about ideas, but about recognition. A small tension entered the room like static. It was faint at first, then sharp. He wanted credit for a phrase. She felt unseen. Words began to twist. The lightness that had filled the air turned heavy. Inspiration stalled. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the field was gone. The silence was no longer sacred, it was hollow. The third mind had withdrawn. He felt it instantly, that sudden emptiness, the loss of flow. It was as if music had stopped mid-song. He realized with painful clarity that harmony is not a condition, it is a discipline. The ego must remain transparent, or the channel closes. He looked at her and said quietly, "We just lost it, didn't we?" She sighed, eyes glistening. "Yes, for a moment we started thinking of ownership instead of service." He nodded. "And the third mind doesn't belong to those who want control. It only visits those who surrender." They both fell silent. Then, as humility returned, so did the light. The heaviness lifted like mist, and with it came a new realization. The third mind was not a reward for perfection. It was a reflection of alignment. The moment alignment was restored through forgiveness, the current resumed. From that day on, they began every meeting with a brief prayer, not religious but intentional. Let our purpose be pure. Let our thoughts serve creation, not pride. The practice worked like calibration. The field always responded. He understood now why Hill insisted on the phrase, "in the spirit of harmony." Harmony is not agreement on ideas, it is agreement on intention. When the intention is to create value and uplift consciousness, the universe joins the effort. When intention turns selfish, the universe withdraws silently. Weeks passed, their projects flourished, Opportunities arrived effortlessly. People began to notice something magnetic about their partnership as if they radiated invisible coherence. Others felt better simply being around them. They were no longer two individuals working. They were one organism expressing divine intelligence. He began teaching the principle to others quietly at first, then with confidence. When you form a mastermind alliance, he would say, you are not merely gathering minds, you are summoning God's geometry. Two frequencies merge to create a third wavelength higher, finer, and infinitely creative. That is the true partnership between man and the infinite. He explained that every great enterprise in history was built on this unseen geometry. Edison and Ford, Jobs and Wozniak, even Hill and Carnegie. The mastermind was not a club of men, it was a communion of minds tuned to the same divine key. Late one night, after a long session of planning, the woman turned to him and said, "You know, this isn't really about us, is it?" He smiled. "No, we're just instruments. The music plays through us." She laughed softly. "Then let's stay in tune." They sat in silence, letting gratitude fill the space. He could feel the third mind surrounding them again, not as something separate, but as their shared breath. He imagined it as golden light weaving around their thoughts, linking them to a vast web of intelligence that stretched across time. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what Hill meant when he wrote, "When you ally yourself with others for a definite purpose, you place yourself in position to absorb the wisdom of the entire universe." The third mind was not limited to two people, it could expand infinitely. Each new participant added more nodes of consciousness, strengthening the field, amplifying its reach. It was not addition, it was multiplication. Two minds became three, three became nine, nine became a network of light stretching through the unseen layers of existence. He began to visualize this network lines of golden current connecting thinkers, dreamers, believers across continents and centuries. Each idea sent ripples through the grid, inspiring others who might never meet but were nevertheless connected. The third mind was the architecture of progress itself. One evening, as the candle burned low, he wrote in his journal, "The third mind is God thinking through willing instruments. It appears when ego dissolves and vanishes when fear returns. To sustain it is to sustain heaven on earth." When he finished writing, he placed his hand on the page, closed his eyes, and whispered, "Let me always remember who does the thinking." The words felt like a vow. He realized then that every true creator, artist, inventor, teacher, healer was a host for the third mind. What we call genius is simply uninterrupted cooperation with infinite intelligence. What we call mediocrity is interference from fear. The difference between them is not talent, but trust. That night he dreamed of a vast cathedral made of light. At its center, thousands of minds glowed like lanterns connected by golden threads. He walked through its halls and recognized faces: Hill, Edison, Tesla, Carnegie, even souls unknown to history, yet luminous in spirit. They turned to him with gentle smiles, as if to say, "Welcome to the council." When he awoke, tears wet his pillow. They were not tears of sorrow, but of remembrance. He knew now that the third mind was not a concept to understand, but a reality to embody. It had existed before him and would continue long after, weaving destinies, building empires, healing minds. He rose, opened the window to the morning air, and whispered into the rising sun, "Use me!" And somewhere, beyond the limits of hearing, the third mind answered not in words, but in the unfolding harmony of the day ahead. Evening descended like velvet over the city. Lights blinked on one by one, constellations mirrored in glass and stone. The man walked along the boulevard, coat collar turned up against a soft wind that smelled faintly of rain. People hurried past, faces lit by phone screens, minds spinning in silent isolation. Yet to him, the crowd felt orchestrated movements flowing with such quiet precision that he could almost hear the score behind them. He smiled to himself. Once you awaken to the mastermind field, chance disappears. Everything becomes composition. A taxi stopped just before he stepped from the curb. A child's laughter rose from a passing window. Somewhere, a street musician began to play a slow tune on a violin. Each sound layered perfectly over the other, and in that instant he felt it again, the pulse of a vast intelligence arranging the details of ordinary life into harmony. The invisible conductor, he thought. The same force that holds planets in orbit was now guiding footsteps, glances, coincidences. He remembered Hill's promise. When your plan is clear and your faith unwavering, unseen forces come to your aid. Until now, he had accepted the sentence as metaphor. Tonight, it felt literal. The conductor was real, not a personality, not a deity perched above the clouds, but a living law that coordinated all vibrations into perfect timing. Every mind that thought with purpose became an instrument in its symphony. He crossed the street and entered a small park where lamps glowed like halos in the mist. Sitting on a bench, he watched the rhythm of life unfold. The jogger's steady pace, the breeze stirring leaves in countertempo, the flicker of lamps synchronizing with his heartbeat. There was intelligence here, and it was listening. He whispered, "I know you're there." A sudden calm descended, deep enough to still thought. Into that silence came an inner voice, not foreign, not his own, simply clear. It said, "You have never walked alone. Every step was scored before you took it." He exhaled slowly. The words carried no command, only comfort. The invisible conductor had been with him all along, turning even his detours into rhythm. Failure had never been punishment, it had been rehearsal. Each delay had strengthened timing, each setback had tuned humility. The conductor wastes nothing. He looked back over his life and saw the pattern. The missed train that led to the crucial encounter, the rejection that redirected him toward mastery, the heartbreak that purified intention. At the time, those moments had felt chaotic. Now they appeared symmetrical, necessary, divine. The symphony of destiny could only be heard from altitude, never from the middle of a measure. He rose from the bench and began to walk again, whispering gratitude with every step. Gratitude, he realized, was applause offered to the conductor after each movement. It said, "I hear you, continue." The more he thanked, the smoother the rhythm became. Traffic lights turned green as he approached. Strangers met his gaze and smiled. Tiny affirmations appeared in sequence, proof that alignment was its own magnet. Back in his apartment, he lit a candle and opened his journal. The flame wavered, then steadied a metronome of light. He wrote, "The conductor arranges what my intellect cannot. My duty is to keep tempo through faith." He paused, feeling the pen vibrate slightly in his hand, as if moved by unseen current. The insight unfolded. The universe is not random energy, but conscious coordination. Every particle, every thought, every dream vibrates to a master rhythm. The conductor is the bridge between infinite intelligence and manifested form, the agent that synchronizes desire with opportunity, people with purpose, time with readiness. He thought of Hill's observation that thoughts are things. But more accurately, thoughts are notes. Alone they are noise. Harmonized through faith, they become music. The conductor takes raw sound and composes destiny. A gust of wind pressed against the window pane. Instead of resisting, he listened. The wind carried voices, laughter from the street below, a dog barking in echo, the far hum of a train. Everything fit. Even chaos obeyed cadence. He whispered, "Conduct me." That night he dreamt vividly. He stood in a grand hall filled with musicians tuning their instruments. None could see the conductor, yet each waited for the unseen baton. When silence fell, a pulse of light swept through the hall, and music burst forth, complex, wild, perfect. He looked down and realized that he too held an instrument, his mind. Each thought was a string, each emotion a note. The quality of his thinking determined the purity of sound. When he doubted, strings slackened. When he believed, they sang. He woke with the echo of that orchestra still resounding in his chest. Morning sunlight spilled across the sheets. He reached for his notebook before memory faded. "The invisible conductor requires no worship," he wrote, "only cooperation. Faith is obedience to rhythm." From that day, he began to notice the law in action everywhere. When he acted from intuition, events aligned effortlessly. When he forced outcomes, discord followed. The pattern never failed. Timing, he realized, is God's signature. What appears late is precise. What appears early is incomplete. One afternoon, he missed an important meeting when the subway stalled between stations. Frustration rose, then he caught himself. "Stay in tempo," he murmured. Minutes later, as the train resumed, he met an elderly man seated across from him who struck up conversation about philosophy. Within 10 minutes, that stranger introduced him to a contact who would later transform his career. Coincidence? No. It was the conductor rearranging measures to preserve harmony. He began living by a new creed: act when moved, rest when still, trust the pause. Each day unfolded like music scored by invisible hand. Opportunities arrived in crescendos, followed by rests of silence meant for integration. He no longer feared the quiet, he listened to it. In silence, the next cue was always whispered. At night, he reflected on Hill's teaching of applied faith, the willingness to move as though success were already secured. The invisible conductor, he saw, is drawn to such confidence. Doubt scatters rhythm, faith attracts tempo. To believe before evidence appears is to play one's part flawlessly. He noticed another law hidden inside the first: humility. The conductor favors those who know they are instruments, not authors. Pride disrupts flow. Gratitude restores it. He remembered the argument that once severed his third mind partnership and silently vowed never to repeat that error. Harmony demanded surrender. Weeks passed. Each morning he greeted the day the same way, standing by the window, breathing deeply, declaring, "Guide me through perfect timing." Without fail, the day would reveal orchestration too precise to deny. A delayed call would save him from wasted effort. A random encounter would deliver the missing piece to a plan. Even moments of irritation served purpose. They slowed him just long enough to avoid unseen mistakes. One evening he walked through the city as golden dusk melted into night. Music drifted from an open door, a jazz trio improvising around a theme. He paused, enchanted. No sheet music, no commands, yet the musicians moved as one. Each listened intently to the others, allowing space for spontaneity while honoring structure. That, he realized, was how the invisible conductor worked, not dictating notes but maintaining harmony. Free will was improvisation. Destiny was key signature. Together they created art. He stayed until the song ended, then whispered thanks to the players as if they had confirmed a secret of the universe. Back home, he meditated by candlelight. Thoughts rose and fell like instruments testing pitch. He watched them until only stillness remained, and from that stillness a voice emerged, gentle, vast, unmistakable. Trust alignment more than effort, he understood instantly. Effort born of tension produces noise. Effort born of faith produces tone. The conductor responds not to struggle but to surrender. He wrote the phrase in his journal, underlined it twice, and added, "My task is not to control the music, but to keep myself tuned." Days became weeks. His external life transformed quietly but unmistakably. Work expanded with ease. Relationships deepened. Even the smallest errands unfolded smoothly, as though guided by unseen traffic lights. He no longer prayed for miracles, he expected order. Yet the greatest gift was inner peace. The constant urgency that once haunted him had dissolved into timing he could trust. Every pause felt purposeful, every acceleration inspired. He had entered what Hill might have called the rhythm of success, the moment when man and infinite intelligence move as one mind, one motion. One night, standing on his balcony under a sky jeweled with stars, he felt gratitude rise so strong it bordered on awe. He whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for conducting what I could never compose." The wind responded, rustling leaves in gentle applause. He realized then that the invisible conductor was not somewhere above, guiding from distance. It was within him, the divine intelligence orchestrating his heartbeat, breathing his lungs, shaping thought into destiny. To be in harmony with it was not worship, but recognition. He closed his eyes and listened. The city hummed below, traffic flowing like a low drumbeat. Somewhere a church bell rang the hour. Somewhere else, laughter echoed. Every sound merged into one great chord, life's eternal amen. He smiled, understanding at last that faith was not belief in something unseen. Faith was the unseen itself, expressing through every visible thing. The conductor and the music were one. He whispered, "Play on," and the universe obeyed. Morning sunlight poured through the window, warm and golden, like grace made visible. The man stood in its glow, feeling energy circulate through him as though the universe were breathing him alive. Each day had become an act of alignment, an unfolding of the invisible conductor's rhythm. Yet within him a new realization was forming, quiet but insistent. Faith alone, though powerful, was never meant to exist in isolation. Faith was a current, and currents need circuits. To multiply power, the circuit had to expand beyond one. He remembered Hill's words echoing through time. Faith is the starting point of all accumulation of riches. Faith is the element that transforms the ordinary vibration of thought into its spiritual equivalent. But Hill had also written that faith, when joined with others of the same purpose, could move worlds. It was time to test that truth. That week, he invited a small group of like-minded souls to his home. They were not scholars or philosophers, just ordinary people touched by hunger for something higher. A teacher seeking renewal, a young entrepreneur burned by failure, a widow yearning to find meaning again, and the woman who had helped him discover the third mind. They gathered in his candlelit study, the same room where he had once whispered, "Tonight I stop building alone." As they sat in a circle, silence filled the space like sacred air. The man felt a familiar hum, the mastermind frequency awakening. "We are here," he began softly, "not to discuss theories, but to prove them through vibration. Hill called it the Mastermind Alliance. I call it the Alliance of Faith." He looked around the circle. "Each of us carries a seed of vision. Alone it may grow slowly, but together we form a field. When our minds harmonize in purpose, infinite intelligence joins us. Let this meeting be that field." They closed their eyes. At first, the room was still. Then a subtle rhythm began, their breath synchronizing, hearts aligning, minds opening. The man could feel the invisible connection forming, a network of energy weaving through them. It wasn't imagination. It was as tangible as heartbeat. He spoke again, voice steady. "Faith is not belief in chance. It is cooperation with law, and law responds to unity." One by one, they shared their desires, not as pleas, but as declarations already fulfilled. The teacher spoke of inspiring thousands with wisdom. The entrepreneur described building a company guided by purpose rather than profit. The widow spoke of finding peace so radiant that others would heal simply by being near her. As each voice rose, the energy in the room thickened, shimmering with certainty. The man felt tears sting his eyes. He realized he was witnessing creation in real-time thought, transforming into substance through collective conviction. Hill had written of such moments, but words could never capture their electricity. This was faith amplified, magnified, multiplied. When the last voice faded, silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It pulsed. The room itself seemed to breathe. The candle flames leaned toward the center of the circle as if magnetized. Something unseen had entered the presence of the third mind, elevated into divine union. Then came a moment of revelation. He saw that faith was not emotion, nor hope, nor optimism. Faith was vibration, a living current that could be transferred, shared, ignited in others. Just as one candle lights another without losing its flame, faith shared increases light exponentially. He spoke softly. "When one believes, mountains tremble. When many believe together, the mountain dissolves." The group remained still, eyes closed, basking in the resonance. For several minutes, no one spoke. Words would have broken the spell. Finally, the woman opened her eyes and said, "It feels like the air is alive." "It is," he replied. "That's faith made visible." From that day forward, they met every week, same hour, same place. Each meeting began with gratitude and ended in vision. There were no titles, no hierarchies, no debates. Their power lay in simplicity. They believed together. Soon, evidence appeared. The teacher received an unexpected invitation to speak at an international conference. The entrepreneur met an investor who resonated perfectly with his mission. The widow began writing letters that comforted hundreds online. Every outcome seemed to flow from the alliance, as if the universe itself were attending their meetings. The man understood then that Hill's principle of the mastermind had always been spiritual technology. Faith, multiplied by unity, becomes the highest form of creative power available to man. One evening during their sixth gathering, he addressed the group. Faith is not passive trust. It is active cooperation with infinite intelligence. When we meet, we don't beg. We broadcast. We emit the frequency of certainty, and the universe must return its echo. The law cannot be broken. He paused, then added, "But this power demands purity of intention. If ego enters, harmony leaves. Guard the vibration as you would guard life itself." The widow smiled gently. "It feels like we are tuning instruments before a grand performance." He nodded. "Exactly. The conductor is listening. That night, they tried something new. They decided to focus on one shared vision to create a community center in their city where people could study these principles freely. They visualized the building together, the color of its walls, the sound of voices inside, the smell of books and coffee, the laughter of visitors whose lives were changing. Each detail painted itself more vividly until it felt less like imagination and more like memory. As they visualized, emotion rose, not yearning, but gratitude as if it already existed. The man felt a current surge through his chest, strong enough to bring tears. When they opened their eyes, the room glowed faintly gold, though no one could explain the source of the light. They sat in stunned silence, aware that something sacred had just been born in the invisible realm. 3 days later, the first sign appeared. A benefactor, who had never heard of their group, contacted the teacher with an offer to donate an unused building for a cause that uplifts human potential. The details matched their vision: exactly the same neighborhood, the same design, the same opportunity. It was as though reality had read their minutes and obeyed. The man laughed when he heard the news. "Of course," he said, "faith never delays. It waits for readiness." Word spread. Their alliance grew. Each new member brought fresh energy, and each week the field expanded. People arrived anxious and left radiant. Some claimed physical healings, others creative breakthroughs. But the man cared less about miracles than about transformation. The real miracle was awareness, the understanding that we are co-authors with the divine. One night, as he prepared the room before the meeting, he felt the familiar hum intensify. He knew without doubt that infinite intelligence was present. He whispered, "What would you have us learn next?" The answer arrived as intuition clear as voice. "Teach them that faith shared becomes vision, and vision shared becomes reality." When the group gathered, he told them what he had received. "The alliance of faith is not a ritual," he said. "It's a reminder. The power we seek is already within each of us, but belief multiplies in the presence of others. Alone, faith whispers. Together, it roars." He looked around at their faces glowing in candlelight, the teacher, the entrepreneur, the widow, the woman beside him, and felt deep reverence. He understood that no one among them was leader or follower. Each was a note in the same divine chord. As weeks turned to months, their meetings became legend. Strangers would knock at the door, drawn by intuition, saying they had felt a call. The circle always made room. Each newcomer brought a new octave, and the vibration soared higher. At times, the group would sit in silence so profound that the air itself shimmered. People reported seeing light, hearing inner music, feeling waves of love that defied language. The man no longer doubted Hill's assertion that faith is the eternal elixir which gives life, power, and action to the impulse of thought. He had seen it, felt it, lived it. The alliance of faith had become a living organism, breathing through many hearts, guided by one rhythm. But faith, like fire, must be tended. There came nights when fatigue dulled their focus, when worry crept in disguised as realism. The man reminded them gently, "Doubt is static in the signal. The conductor is still playing, we just stopped listening." At those words, calm would return and the music of certainty would resume. Eventually, their community center opened its doors. It stood modest but radiant sunlight pouring through wide windows onto shelves of books and quiet corners for meditation. Above the entrance, carved into wood, were Hill's words: "Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve." Visitors came from everywhere, seeking the vibration they felt in stories about the place. The alliance had become movement. On the opening day, as hundreds gathered, the man stepped forward to speak. His voice carried the gravity of one who had seen behind the veil. "We built this place not with money, but with faith. Faith multiplied through harmony. Let this building remind you that what begins invisible can shape the visible world. When minds unite in purpose, the universe bends to listen." He paused, scanning the faces in front of him. Hill wrote that when two or more minds come together in harmony, a third mind, an unseen intelligence, is born. I tell you now, that intelligence is alive in this very air. Feel it, trust it, become it. The crowd fell silent, every soul tuned to the same resonance. For a heartbeat, the entire hall seemed to glow, not metaphorically, but literally, a soft golden hue dancing across the walls like living light. Some gasped, others wept quietly. He closed his eyes and whispered, "The alliance is complete. That night, after everyone had gone, he stood alone in the empty hall. The air still vibrated with power. He looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Thank you for showing us what unity can do." The silence answered with peace. He realized then that faith is the most democratic power in existence, available to all, withheld from none. It asks only alignment and belief, and when shared, it becomes the very architecture of miracles. As he left the hall and stepped into the night, stars burned brighter than usual, as if the heavens themselves were acknowledging the alliance below. He smiled, hearing Hill's voice echo in his heart, "Faith is the starting point of all miracles." And the man whispered back, "And unity is its completion." He walked on, beneath the quiet sky, carrying the glow of 1,000 awakened minds, a living testament to the law that had begun as theory and ended as reality. The alliance of faith had become more than gathering. It was a rhythm of creation, proof that when souls unite in belief, the universe conducts a masterpiece through their hands. And somewhere beyond the stars, the invisible conductor smiled the symphony, once again perfectly in tune. The night had fallen like a gentle hush over the city. The street lights shimmered in puddles left by a late rain, and the man walked slowly through the quiet, feeling as though the whole world were breathing with him. He no longer hurried anywhere. Movement itself had become meditation. Every step seemed guided, every moment precise, every breath a silent dialogue with the infinite. Months had passed since the alliance of faith began, yet its effects still unfolded like ripples across a still lake. Lives had changed, paths had aligned. What once felt miraculous now felt natural, as if the universe had always intended things to flow this way. And through it all, the man had learned one immutable truth: the greatest evidence of power is peace. He paused beneath a street lamp, looking up at its golden halo through drifting mist. For years he had chased external validation, success, applause, recognition, believing that proof must arrive with sound and spectacle. But Hill had hinted at a subtler truth. The power of thought is silent, yet its results command the world. Tonight those words resonated like prophecy. He walked on, hands in pockets, and felt gratitude rising from depths beyond emotion. Gratitude had become his compass, always pointing him back to faith. Every outcome the alliance achieved had come through vibration first, then form. And now, as he reflected on their journey, he realized that proof had never been absent, only misinterpreted. The silent proof was everywhere. It was in the calm that lingered long after each meeting. It was in the gentle confidence that replaced old fears. It was in the synchronicities that now appeared too often to be ignored. The proof was not noise or drama. It was precision, grace, inevitability. He smiled, remembering Hill's assertion that faith is the eternal elixir which gives life, power, and action to the impulse of thought. He had witnessed it, not in thunder, but in whisper. Every great law of the universe operates in silence. Gravity does not shout, light does not boast, electricity hums unseen. Only results reveal their presence. He returned home and lit a single candle. The flame danced softly, casting golden circles on the walls. He placed his hands on the table and whispered, "Show me what I've learned." The silence answered not with words, but with awareness. He saw in his mind's eye the faces of those who had sat in the circle of faith, each transformed, each now carrying light of their own. The teacher had become mentor to thousands. The entrepreneur had built his purpose-driven company and employed those once lost to despair. The widow had turned her letters into a book that healed countless hearts. The alliance had become self-sustaining, like a constellation of souls held together by gravity of belief. And yet, he realized the true miracle was not what they built, but who they became. Faith had refined them into instruments of order. They no longer sought proof, they were proof. He looked around the quiet room and laughed softly. So this is how power speaks, without noise, without need. And he remembered Hill's line, "When riches begin to come, they come so quickly, in such abundance, that one wonders where they have been hiding during all those lean years." But riches were no longer his measure. He understood now that the truest wealth is spiritual coherence, the inner equilibrium that cannot be purchased, imitated, or destroyed. He thought of the early nights, the confusion, the striving, the endless questions. Those had been necessary storms, the prelude to calm. The path of mastery, he realized, always moves from noise to stillness, from seeking to knowing, from action to presence. The outer achievements were just reflections of an inner frequency perfected by faith. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and entered that familiar space of silence that once frightened him but now felt like home. In that silence, he could sense the entire alliance breathing. Even from afar, their minds still harmonized by invisible thread. He knew they felt him too. Distance meant nothing in the field of faith. Once unity was established, separation ceased to exist. As his awareness expanded, he began to see how the universe communicates through symmetry. Every unanswered prayer had been protection. Every delay had been refinement. Every closed door had redirected him toward the right one. Proof was never absent, only unrecognized by impatience. He whispered, "Now I see the order." The candle flame flickered as if in response. In that golden shimmer, he saw the whole arc of his journey, from the man staring into the dark window of doubt to the one now illuminated by quiet certainty. The thread had always been there, leading him from lesson to lesson, whisper to whisper, until faith became his nature. He wrote in his journal, "The silent proof of power is peace. When results no longer surprise you, faith has become fact." The words carried weight beyond intellect. They were lived truth. He felt an urge to share this realization, but the deeper wisdom stopped him. Some things cannot be taught through speech. They must be felt through silence. The proof of mastery is not explanation, it is presence. He thought of Hill's statement that thought, backed by faith, knows no such word as impossible. Those words had once felt like challenge. Now they felt like confirmation. The impossible had never been an obstacle. It had been a test of vibration. The moment he stopped struggling against the unseen and began harmonizing with it, impossibility evaporated. He rose, walked to the window, and looked out at the sleeping city. Light from the moon reflected on rooftops, soft and constant. Even the shadows seemed orderly. He realized that the world, like faith, is self-organizing. When one aligns internally, the external rearranges itself to match. He remembered a conversation from the early days of the alliance when someone had asked, "How will we know if it's working?" He had smiled then, and he smiled again now, whispering the answer he had given. "You'll know when you no longer need to ask." That was the essence of silent proof, certainty without evidence, knowing without argument. The most powerful truths require no defense. They radiate authority simply by existing. He thought of the law of resonance and how it had first awakened his understanding. Back then he had treated vibration as cause and effect. Now he saw it as communion, a dance between thought and cosmos, between desire and divine timing. When the dance becomes effortless, proof becomes unnecessary. He turned back to his journal and wrote another line. "Silence is the signature of truth. The louder the claim, the weaker the faith." The candle burned lower, its flame smaller but steadier. He watched the wax melt and realized that even the candle proved the law, giving light through surrender. Its quiet consumption was its creation. That was faith in form, the act of dissolving fear to illuminate purpose. He remembered Hill's teaching that every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. He smiled. Knowing that he had lived the equation backward, he had searched for benefits first and found that adversity had transformed itself into meaning. Faith had rewritten his memory. Even pain now appeared as precision. The clock ticked, marking seconds, like drops of eternity. He felt time slow until it almost stopped. The conductor was present again, guiding not events now but awareness. He whispered, "I understand." In that moment, he saw how all things connect: the rain, the breath, the meetings, the delays, the triumphs. Each note had played its part in the divine composition, nothing wasted, nothing random. Every motion accounted for by invisible intelligence. That understanding filled him with a joy too deep for expression. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, everything vanished the room, the city, even his own identity. What remained was stillness, infinite and alive. It was not emptiness, it was completion. When awareness returned, he opened his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." The words were soft, but the vibration behind them shook the unseen. Gratitude had become his prayer, his proof, his way of saying, I know. He didn't need visions or signs anymore. Faith had matured into fact. The seed of belief had become the tree of knowing. He looked again at the candle now, a small pool of wax around a glowing wick. He thought of Hill's closing wisdom. When you can see and feel your goal within the silence of your own mind, it is already yours. He smiled. It's already mine, he said aloud. And in that whisper, the room seemed to exhale, walls softening, air brightening, silence deepening until it felt eternal. That was the moment of true proof, not in seeing, but in being. The silent proof was not a miracle that demanded witnesses. It was the natural state of harmony when man becomes one with law, when thought, feeling, and purpose vibrate as a single chord. The proof was the peace that followed, unshakable, unwavering, divine. He stood, walked to the window one last time, and looked at the horizon beginning to pale with dawn. The first light of morning kissed the rooftops like blessing. He whispered, "The proof is the peace." And in that quiet declaration, the cycle felt complete. The unseen thread that had led him through confusion, awakening, alignment, and faith had now woven him into the fabric of infinity itself. He was no longer the seeker. He was the signal. The universe played through him like a perfect note held in endless resonance. The candle flickered once more, then stilled flame steady, unwavering. The silent proof had spoken. Dawn broke like revelation. The horizon glowed amber, and the city beneath it stirred in hushed unison. From his window, the man watched sunlight spill across rooftops, washing the night away as if some invisible hand were wiping the slate of the world clean. Every new day, he realized, is mercy incarnate, the universe granting yet another rehearsal for perfection. He felt the calm of one who no longer wonders whether life is guided. He knew it is. What he sought was no longer proof, but participation. The thread that began in darkness had pulled him through the labyrinth of mind into the sanctuary of faith. Now it curved back toward its origin, revealing itself as a circle infinite, unbroken, eternal. He brewed his coffee and stood quietly, listening to the familiar hum of existence, distant traffic, birds calling the morning into being, the faint rhythm of footsteps below. Each sound folded into the next like instruments tuning before a symphony. He smiled. The invisible conductor was already at work. Faith, resonance, harmony, silence, every lesson had been a movement in a larger composition. What remained was the final revelation, that there is no end to this music. The circle does not close. It expands. That afternoon, he visited the community center, the living proof of their alliance. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows onto polished floors where students sat in quiet meditation. Shelves lined with books seemed to breathe wisdom. The air itself shimmered with tranquility. He walked slowly through the hall, feeling gratitude pulse in time with his heartbeat. The building had begun as vision, a whisper between believers, and now it stood solid, radiant, filled with laughter and learning. Yet even this, he sensed, was not completion. It was continuation, one link in an infinite chain of creation. He paused before the carved inscription above the entrance. Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. The words seemed alive, as though the wood itself remembered the vibration that had shaped it. He touched the carving gently and whispered, "We conceived, we believed, and we achieved, but the law goes on." Inside, the woman from the earliest days of the mastermind saw him and smiled. "They're waiting for you," she said. "The new students want to hear how it all began." He nodded. In the lecture hall, a circle of listeners sat ready, notebooks open, eyes bright with the hunger that always precedes awakening. He stood before them, not as teacher, but as witness. He began softly, his voice carrying the stillness of one who has seen behind the veil. "Every truth I share," he said, "is older than memory and younger than this breath." Hill called it the mastermind principle. Others call it faith, resonance, divine order. Names change. Law remains. What I discovered is that the power that creates worlds hides in plain sight inside your own awareness. The moment two minds meet in harmony, the infinite recognizes itself and begins to build. He looked around the room. "You may think you're here to learn techniques," he continued, "but technique is secondary. What matters is vibration, the quality of your faith. When thought, emotion, and purpose align, the entire universe rearranges to mirror you. The secret is not hidden in books, it's hidden in being. He could feel the field forming as he spoke, that familiar golden hum of collective awareness rising. He gestured toward the circle of faces. Notice what's happening now. Our minds are beginning to harmonize. Can you feel it? That warmth behind the heart, that clarity behind the eyes, that's the infinite circle opening. A young man near the front nodded slowly, eyes moist. The man smiled. Yes, he said, that's it. The circle cannot be created. It can only be remembered. It's the pattern that connects all minds who choose faith over fear. Each of you has touched it before in moments of love, inspiration, creativity, when time vanished and everything felt guided. That was the circle calling you home. He paused, letting silence deepen until even breath became reverent. Hill wrote that the mastermind principle is the coordination of knowledge and effort in the spirit of harmony. But there is a level beyond effort, where harmony becomes identity. At that level, you don't cooperate with the universe, you are the universe cooperating with itself. The room felt weightless. Some closed their eyes, others simply stared at the light that seemed to emanate from nowhere. You ask, what is infinite intelligence? He continued. It is not a distant being. It is the consciousness through which all beings move. You are cells in its body, thoughts in its mind. The moment you act in love, you act as it. He told them of the alliance of faith, of the candlelit gatherings, of the building they now sat within. He described the moments of silence so thick with energy that reality itself seemed to bend. Every miracle we witnessed, he said, was born in stillness. The louder you seek, the farther you stray. Faith whispers. The infinite answers in echo. A woman raised her hand timidly. How do we stay in the circle once we feel it? He smiled. By gratitude, he said. Gratitude is the gravity of the infinite circle. It holds you in orbit around truth. Doubt repels, thanks attracts. Each time you give thanks before results appear, you prove that you trust the law, and the law rushes to vindicate that trust. He invited them to close their eyes. Imagine light gathering in the center of this room, he whispered. See it expand until it touches everyone here, connecting heart to heart. This light has no beginning and no end. It's the same light that moved through Hill when he wrote his words, the same that moved through us when we built this place. Feel it entering you, filling you, remembering itself through you. Silence fell not empty but vibrant. The air thickened until it seemed almost visible. Some gasped quietly, others wept. He felt it too, that boundless awareness spreading through every cell, turning breath into prayer. The infinite circle had formed again, not through ritual but through recognition. They were joined not by hands but by frequency. After a long moment, he spoke softly. This is what Hill meant when he said, when faith is blended with thought, the subconscious mind instantly picks up the vibration and translates it into its spiritual equivalent. What you feel now is that translation. Faith has become substance. When the meditation ended, the group sat in stunned quiet. Some looked around as if waking from dream. The man smiled gently. Now you know, he said. This power isn't mine or yours, it's ours. The infinite circle has no center, because every believer is its center. The moment you act in harmony with purpose, you become the point through which infinity expresses. After the gathering dispersed, he lingered alone in the hall. Evening light slanted through high windows, bathing the floor in gold. Dust motes drifted like tiny suns, turning slowly in air. He stood watching them and thought, even the smallest particle knows how to move in harmony. He walked outside into the twilight. The sky was deep indigo, stars already piercing through. He thought of all the minds connected by invisible thread, his friends, his students, the countless souls who would one day hear these teachings and feel the vibration awaken in them. The network stretched beyond imagination, a web of light circling the planet. The infinite circle was not metaphor anymore. It was reality consciousness recognizing itself through billions of hearts. He whispered to the night, "We are one thought thinking itself through many forms." A breeze brushed his face, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. He closed his eyes, listening. The wind seemed to speak in Hill's familiar cadence. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. But remember, the greatest achievement is harmony itself. He opened his eyes, smiling. Harmony, yes. The goal had never been riches, success, or influence. Those were reflections. The true attainment was inner equilibrium. the rhythm of divine mind beating quietly within human awareness. When that rhythm is sustained, everything else aligns: health, wealth, love, purpose, all extensions of the same frequency. He felt an impulse to kneel, not in worship, but in wonder. Above him, constellations burned like points on a vast mandala. Perhaps every star, he thought, marks a mind awake somewhere in creation. Perhaps faith itself is the light of consciousness seen from afar. He whispered, "The circle never ends." A calm joy flooded him, not excitement, but peace so vast it erased the boundaries of self. He understood then that enlightenment is not ascension, but circulation. The soul does not rise out of life. It flows through life, completing loops of learning and love until every shadow is illuminated. The infinite circle is that movement, God experiencing God through endless variation. He stayed there until the chill of night touched his skin, then turned toward home. The streets were nearly empty. His footsteps echoed softly, steady as a heartbeat. Each echo reminded him that sound itself is circular, leaving, returning, fading into silence only to be reborn. Nothing is lost, everything returns. That is the law. Back in his study, he lit a candle as he always did. The flame rose clear and unwavering. He opened his journal to a fresh page and wrote, "The infinite circle is faith matured into knowledge. It is the realization that beginnings and endings are illusions of perception. Creation is a single breath, inhaled and exhaled forever." He paused, then continued. "Every act of kindness extends the circle. Every thought of fear breaks it temporarily but cannot destroy it. For even fear, once understood, becomes fuel for greater faith. Nothing opposes the infinite, everything serves its unfolding." He set down the pen and watched the ink dry in candlelight. A wave of serenity washed over him, the quiet exultation of one who has finished a pilgrimage, only to find himself at the doorway of another. There was no finality here, only continuation, expansion, return. He whispered, "What now?" And from the depths of his being the answer arose, simple and timeless. "Now share." He nodded slowly. The circle would grow not by preaching, but by presence, by living faith so completely that others could feel it and remember their own. That was Hill's ultimate teaching. That thought, charged with emotion and directed by purpose, becomes contagious. Faith spreads by frequency, not persuasion. He blew out the candle. Darkness flowed in, soft and kind. Yet even in darkness he could sense the circle glowing, a field of golden awareness, stretching beyond walls, beyond nations, beyond lifetimes. Somewhere, another soul was awakening at that exact moment, touched by the same unseen current. The infinite circle was doing what it had always done, turning, expanding, including, returning. He lay down to rest, heart steady, mind clear. Just before sleep claimed him, a single thought rose not from intellect, but from the infinite itself. The circle is complete, and yet it has only begun. He smiled into the silence. Outside, the wind carried the faint rhythm of waves from a distant shore, repeating endlessly the same holy pattern: rise, fall, return, as the universe itself whispered its eternal refrain. All is one. Dawn again. The world bathed in gold, soft as forgiveness. The first rays of morning slipped through the window and rested on his desk, the same desk that had witnessed every phase of his transformation. The confusion, the searching, the revelation, and the peace. He sat quietly, hands folded, listening to the language of light. It flickered across the pages of his journal, across the candle he had not yet lit, across the faint dust that danced above the wood. Each shimmer spoke of continuity. Thought, he realized, was never the source of power, it was the vessel. Behind every thought that ever changed a life, behind every plan, every word, every prayer, there has always been light. He closed his eyes and felt it move through him, not metaphorical light, but presence. It was the same radiance that Hill had tried to describe when he wrote of infinite intelligence, the same illumination that mystics called spirit, that scientists sensed as energy, that poets named love. It was all the same current, and it flowed silently behind the theater of the mind. For years he had mistaken thought for master. He had trained his mind, disciplined it, fed it books and strategies. But thought alone is like a lamp without fire. It can shape the glass, polish the frame, but only light gives it purpose. Now he understood. Thought is form, faith is flame. And behind them both, unseen yet sovereign, burns the source, the light that never flickers. He rose and walked to the window. Outside, the world was awakening, street vendors setting up stalls, a boy chasing pigeons through the square, clouds drifting like pages across the sky. Everything moved with quiet intention. Even the smallest action seemed guided. He realized that what he saw in the outer world was the same process unfolding within. The universe thinks through everything. Life is thought illuminated by divine awareness. He whispered, "There is no separation between thinker and light." Those words settled deep inside him, erasing the last residue of doubt. The journey had not been toward understanding, but toward remembrance. What Hill had called the secret was never hidden in books or formulas. It had been shining behind every conscious moment, waiting for him to turn inward and see. He thought back to the beginning, the man sitting in darkness, desperate to uncover a secret in words. That man had believed success was something to achieve. Now he saw that success is simply the alignment of human thought with divine rhythm. When that alignment is perfect, thought becomes transparent and the light flows through unbroken. Results follow naturally, not as miracles, but as reflections. He smiled faintly. The mastermind was never between people, he said aloud. It was between thought and light. He lit the candle and watched the flame rise steady and bright. It cast long shadows that swayed gently on the walls. Every shadow, he noticed, existed only because of light. Even darkness was evidence of illumination. The same principle ruled the mind. Every fear proved the presence of faith. Every doubt confirmed that belief waited nearby. There is no true absence, only degrees of awareness. He sat again, pen in hand, and wrote slowly. Thought is the body of light. Light is the soul of thought. Together they build reality. As he wrote, something within him dissolved the constant need to define, to control, to explain. Understanding had done its work. Now experience took its place. He was no longer the student, no longer even the teacher. He was the field itself, the calm intelligence that animates all movement. The candle's flame bent slightly as if acknowledging him. He whispered, "Thank you." The words carried reverence deeper than prayer. Gratitude had become instinct, the natural respiration of his being. Every inhale drew the world into him. Every exhale offered it back sanctified. He remembered Hill's teaching that when you can see and feel your goal within the silence of your own mind, it is already yours. Now he understood why. Seeing and feeling are acts of illumination, light, recognizing itself within form. Once the inner eye perceives with clarity, the outer world has no choice but to mirror that vision. He stood, letting the sunlight mingle with candlelight until the two became indistinguishable. This, he said softly, is the final union when the outer light meets the inner flame. He looked around the room, the books, the chair, the candle, the quiet, everything ordinary yet nothing the same. Awareness transformed the mundane into miracle. Every object glowed faintly, as though reality itself had become translucent. He sensed what Hill must have felt at the end of his own journey, that heaven is not a distant realm, but the unveiled perspective of an awakened mind.